Hi guys, welcome to The Attic. My name's Mark Jago. I'm a philosophy professor in the UK, and today I want to talk you through PhD funding, the tricky topic of getting funded to do your PhD research. So I'm hoping to talk you through what kind of funding there is out there, what it's for, how you go about finding a source of funding, how you go about applying for it, the kind of time frame that might be involved. And I'll talk you through some do's and don'ts. Okay, if that sounds good to you, do me a favour before we get going. Give this video a big old thumbs up. That really helps me out. And if you haven't done already, why not subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon to get notifications. Okay, so let's just start with a quick overview of what exactly is funding for. The answer is it depends. So pretty much all sources of PhD funding out there are going to help you out with the cost of your tuition fees. Okay, now tuition fees come in various different kinds depending on which country you're studying in, but also which country you're coming from. So for instance, in the UK, there is one tuition fee for UK students and there is a different fee for international students, that is everybody else. Pretty much that applies in, I think, pretty much every country. In the US, if you're a US student, it's one fee. And if you're an international student, it's a different fee, okay? So how much you're going to be paying for your PhD depends on where you're going and where you're coming from. Funding, for instance, in the UK, often pays tuition fees for UK students. So if you're an international student, it might pay all of your fees, but it might just pay the UK part of your fees. It depends on what kind of funding you're looking at, so you've just got to look up the details there. But pretty much all kinds of funding offer something, some or all of the cost of your tuition fees. Some sources of funding also offer you a living grant, a stipend, a maintenance grant, or whatever, okay? This is usually a tax-free lump sum that gets paid once a month. So currently in the UK for 2020, UK Research Council grants that go towards PhD living costs, that is £15,609 a year. Okay, so it's not a huge amount of money. You would earn more money if you went out there and got a decent professional job, but it's definitely better than nothing. And if you're really invested in doing your research, it's a good amount of money for doing that kind of study. And you can top up this grant amount with teaching and other stuff during your PhD. Some sources of funding also provide other bits of money for doing other stuff, so for instance for travel to conferences or for internships and that kind of thing. Different bits of funding are going to offer very different things. Some are going to be obviously better than others, so when you're looking through different sources of funding, you've got to be aware of what they offer and which one's going to be better for you. There's also different types of funding out there, depending on the mode in which you're doing your PhD. So just to give you an example, the Midland Four Cities Consortium, that's the one that my university is part of, offers an open doctoral award and a collaborative doctoral award. Okay, so the open doctoral award is basically you applying to the university saying, here's the project that I would like to do. I've come up with this project. Can I have some money, please? The collaborative doctoral award, by contrast, is something that the university, the department has put together with like industry or business or whatever. So the collaboration is between the university and someone out there beyond the university, like a business, and they will advertise those jobs and you would apply for it. So it's much more like applying for a regular job. Okay, so some PhDs you design, you say, I want to do it, can I have some funding? And other ones, if you look at the university websites, they say, we have these PhD positions available, they are funded, but you have to do this topic. So you've got to bear in mind there are these two different ways of applying, and you might want to have a look out for those collaborative doctoral awards. There might be something that is in your area that you could go for where there's money already sitting there for the right candidate. Okay, so how do you actually go about finding these different sources of funding? Okay, so you're going to use your shortlist of the universities you want to go to. I've talked about this in another video when I talked about finding a supervisor. You're going to have a shortlist of maybe 3 or 4 or 5 universities that you'd be interested in studying at. You're going to go through each of them and you're going to look at their websites, and you're basically going to go onto their website. You're going to look at, search for PhD funding, and you're basically just going to trawl through all the sources of funding that are open to students, PhD students at that university. Typically, this is a bit of legwork. There's going to be loads of bits of PhD funding, and 90% of them, 90 something percent of them aren't going to be open to you because, you want to do a project in like philosophy or history and they're all in like, chemical engineering or whatever. But basically, you've got to be looking through all of those because you don't want to miss something that would basically be just right for you and give you money. So it's a bit of a legwork, but hopefully it will pay off. And you can always ask if that department has a dedicated PhD admissions person or a funding advisor. You can basically ask them, so what kind of sources of funding are available through this department? Okay, so you want to get that list together for each department on your shortlist. You want a list of things that are potentially available to you. For each one of them, you've got to check whether you're eligible. So if you're applying in the UK, some are going to be only for UK students, some are going to be only for non-UK students. Some of them might be for only students with a certain kind of criteria, okay, or maybe just doing a certain kind of topic. So at this point, you want to be going through those longer lists and ruling out stuff that you're not eligible for. Do that early on because I've seen people who have got deep into an application, they put loads of time into it, and then it turns out they can't apply for it because they're not eligible. So check eligibility early on. Okay, then what you want to be doing is once you've checked that you're eligible, you want to go through the criteria and the kind of recommendations for how you actually fill in your application. I'm not talking about filling it in at this point. I'm talking about just going through and making notes about what they're after. There's basically going to be loads and loads and loads of information about this, and it's going to be really confusing, and every application is going to be asking for something different. So as you're going through the websites looking at this information, make lots of notes for yourself because it just becomes really, really difficult to kind of keep trawling back through this stuff. So get organized, get a big spreadsheet, get a big document, and for each thing that you're potentially going to be applying for, just get all the information about it at an early stage. Okay, so what is actually going to go into your funding proposal? So this is the big one, right? This is the really tough bit. What are you actually going to write to try and get that bit of funding? So like I said, every source of funding is probably going to have its own application form with its own questions to fill in. So you're probably going to have to tailor what you write for each different thing. But generally, you want to have an application structured around questions like this. Why this project? Why now? Why you? And why here? As in why this university rather than another one? So let's just go through each of those. The most important one is why this project, okay? The project is the most important thing of the funding proposal. So why should somebody fund that piece of research? What sets that piece of research out compared to all the other applications that are going in? So you might be the most wonderful student the world has ever seen, but if your project isn't good, you're not going to get the funding. So what makes a good project? Well, obviously there's loads and loads of different things, and across different disciplines there's going to be, probably no one criteria that says what makes a good project. But in general, a good project has intellectual appeal. So that means in that discipline, people who work in that discipline would look at it and go, oh yeah, that's a good project. But it should also have appeal beyond the discipline. It's got to have some instant boom, I see why you want to do this project. This is probably the thing that people underestimate the most for the purposes of getting funding. It's probably the most important. Okay, so let me just run you through who is actually going to be giving you this funding. So the funding is going to be coming from a funder, but often it's given to universities in a big chunk, and then that university will divide it amongst its PhD students, okay? So it might be the university that is deciding who gets the funding, but it's not going to be people in your department, or chances are it's not going to be people in your department. So if you're applying for a philosophy PhD or a history PhD, it's no guarantee there's going to be a philosopher on the panel. It might be a bunch of, art historians and, anthropologists and, English scholars, basically people with maybe no background in philosophy who know nothing about it, okay? Ditto if you're applying for history or whatever. So it's no good writing this really myopic thing that makes sense only to, logicians or philosophers of language or historians of the 18th century or whatever. It's got to apply right across the board to academics, okay? So it's got to be really, really clear from your research proposal to anyone with a brain why they should fund this. It's got to be super clear, it's got to have no jargon, and it can't just be aimed at people in your discipline. So that's all part of what makes a good research proposal. Ideally, it should also have some appeal beyond academia. You're going to be doing something theoretical as part of your PhD. That's what you do research, it's kind of theoretical. But so what, right? You come up with this amazing theory, let's say. You come up with this, revolutionary theory of your topic. So what? Who's going to benefit from that? Is it like the 10 other scholars working in that area worldwide? Or does your amazing piece of research have some further relevance in other bits of academia? Beyond academia? So let me just contrast some things here, right? Suppose you're really interested in the philosophy of vagueness, theories of vagueness, and you say, you know what, I'm going to come up with a new theory of vagueness. And philosophers are like, yeah, bring it on. We really want a new theory of vagueness. And everyone who's not a philosopher is like, why would anyone want to do that, like, in the first place? And, suppose you come up with this amazing theory of vagueness. So what, right? Whose life does it affect? Suppose you want to do something slightly different. Suppose you're interested in vagueness and you want to look at a specific case because you're interested in borderline cases surrounding pregnancy, let's say. So you want to kind of talk about, borderline cases of being a human, and at what point is it morally legitimate for a woman to have an abortion? At any point, at no point? You're thinking about those ethical questions insofar as they surround this issue of vagueness and borderline cases in conception and in the beginnings of a human life. Now, if you do that one, there is obviously a huge amount of practical consequences hanging on your research, maybe for government policy, for advocacy groups, for a whole bunch of stuff, right? Even if you're not going to be doing that stuff as part of your PhD, the mere fact that you can tell a story where your theoretical research relates to these practical or at least beyond academia type issues, that is going to set your research proposal out amongst the others. How do you make it clear that your project is both ambitious and achievable? So if it's not ambitious, if it's all been done before, if you're basically just going to read a few bits and comment on them, okay, you can do a PhD on that, but no one's going to give you money to do it. It's got to be ambitious. There's got to be something new there. But you don't want to make it super ambitious, like I'm going to revolutionize philosophy or whatever. It's got to be achievable in 3 years, because nobody wants to give you money to do something that it's pretty obvious you can't do within the 4 years. You're going to get halfway through, then give up or whatever. So you've got to demonstrate that it's going to be achievable within those years. Right, so those are the questions. Why now? Why you? Why here? So these are probably less important than the description of the project and capturing all those aspects of like getting as close to the ideal project description I was just talking about. But these other ones are important too, okay? So why now? Why hasn't all this stuff been done before? Okay, so maybe what you talk about here is something has just happened elsewhere in the world of research or in the world or whatever that now makes this topic super, super important. Okay, whether that is changes in legislation or changes in world politics or maybe some developments in psychology or maths or whatever, just stuff that makes your research question now really important. Why you? Why are you the right person to be going about this PhD thesis? Have you got the skills to do it? Have you got the background? You can talk here about the kind of stuff you did in your master's or that you're going to be doing in your master's, that you did on your undergrad dissertation, stuff that you've done beyond research, beyond academia, all that kind of stuff. Why here? Why this university? Okay, so this one isn't probably the most important, but talking about how your PhD supervisor, your potential supervisor, works on this topic, they're a world-leading expert on this topic, there's lots of expertise on this and related issues throughout that department, the facilities that your department's got, the university's got, all that stuff helps make that case of why you and this university are the right place to do this PhD. Okay, so if you're going to be applying for funding, let's talk about the timeline. Lots of deadlines for funding are going to be around January, February, at the start of the year before you start. So if you're starting in September, October, you're going to be applying for the funding right at the start of that year. Let's say January, okay, to be safe. So here's what a timeline might be looking like. So you're going to want to be searching for sources of funding around September. So if you're just starting your master's, pretty much as soon as you start your classes, you're going to be looking at where can I get funded for this PhD? In October, you're going to be wanting to draft your applications and sending them to potential supervisors or potential funding advisors in the departments that you're going to be applying for. So by this point, you should have approached potential supervisors, done a lot of that kind of early discussion, got to the point where they're saying, yep, we want you to come here, apply, let's have a look at your funding application. Not everyone is going to be offering you super amounts of help with this. It kind of really depends on whether they want to and how busy they are. But if you're emailing me and saying, I want to work with you, I'm definitely going to be saying to you, okay, if you're going to go for funding, it's really, really difficult. So I want to look at your funding application and help you through that process. So you send it to me, I give you some comments, send it back, you revise it, and maybe send it to me again, and we do that process. So I actually want you to come and work with me. So I want you to get the funding. So I'm going to give you some help going through that. Okay, so you're doing that around November, December. You're going to be doing your final revisions on your application for submission in January. Okay, let's talk through some do's and don'ts. Here are things that you've definitely got to do. You've got to make your proposal accessible to experts and non-experts alike. You've got to make it clear why anyone should care about that topic and that particular issue that you're going to be looking at. You've got to totally avoid jargon. I mean, just write the whole thing without any jargon. And if you think, I just can't write this without the jargon, think again, because you definitely can. You've got to edit and revise this thing really heavily, okay? You probably haven't written anything like this before. So think about your very first undergraduate essay and your very last undergraduate essay and the difference in quality. That's the kind of difference that you need to do in writing this thing, but you're going to be going from writing the first draft to the final draft in a couple of months. So you have to put that much effort into it by revising it again and again and again. Get help from your potential supervisor if they've offered to help on this. And do be tough on yourself. Don't say, oh yeah, I've edited it. Like, have you really edited it? Have you really revised it? Have you really been tough on yourself? This is probably the hardest thing that you've ever done academically up to this point. Your application can't just be, good enough. It has to be the best it can be because funding is so competitive. So you've got to be really, really tough on yourself. And particularly if you've got a supervisor or someone who's offered to help by looking over your drafts saying, I think you should think about this. Don't be like, I kind of thought about that, but... No, if someone's telling you to do something, 100% do it and make sure that you've really, really done it, okay? So like I'm saying, be tough on yourself because this really is hard. Things not to do. Don't go into loads of detail. Most applications are short and typically you're trying to tell a story about why anyone should care. So you don't want lots of technical details that just sound like tangents or the sort of things that non-experts aren't going to care about. Don't slag off other approaches. So don't go about like, people always do it this way, but they're really stupid. You do want to talk up why your approach to things is good, but you don't want to do that by saying that, everybody else has done it badly. Chances are what that comes across as being like is maybe you haven't really understood everything that's going on here. I mean, the idea that everyone who's ever thought about this topic before you has somehow got it wrong, that doesn't come across well on an application. Try not to make big assumptions, okay? So you're just trying to talk up this as a research project, something to go and research, rather than trying to throw out loads of assumptions there where the reviewers might be like, I can't really see this working or this being justified or whatever. Okay, finally, if someone's offered to give you some feedback on a draft, don't send them something shoddy that you hastily put together, okay? If they're doing you a favour in helping you out, send them the best thing that you can. Even though you know that they're going to comment on it and you're going to revise it, send them the best thing that you can right now, and they will help you make it better. If you send them something a bit shoddy, they might be a bit like, this is not really going to be going anywhere, and they're not probably going to be giving you the best help you could get. Okay, guys, so there we have some of my thoughts on how you go about finding sources of funding, what it's for, how you actually go about applying for it, and some of the do's and don'ts that I think you should and shouldn't do when you're actually putting your research application together. It is a really fraught experience. It can be really, really difficult. You've got to be tough on yourself. And, it is super, super competitive. Go for it. If you get it, fantastic, well done. And if you don't, no big deal. There's a lot of chance involved, so you shouldn't feel bad if you don't get funding. But I wish you the best of luck with it. If you've got any questions on this, leave me a comment down below. I'm trying to reply to all of them. Thank you so much for watching this far. If you have enjoyed it, if you've got something out of it, give it a thumbs up. That really helps me out. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, get notifications when I've got more videos coming up on PhD help and other topics. Thanks again for watching this far, and I'll see you back here soon.